Welcome to the dungeon. Dum dum dum. What's up, Chereese?
Hi, Sheedia. It's nice to be back in the dungeon. It's hot
Yes.
down here. Jeez.
Did we create did we
Did we
affect
create
the
an
weather?
inferno?
Yeah.
Man, it's not even summertime in the Caribbean and it's hot.
Yeah. It's and I think it's hot everywhere too. So it is what it is. We trying to survive down here. Send some cold front.
Surviving and thriving, but
Yeah.
yes, surviving.
Actually, there was this reminds me of a story. One time we were in Trinidad and we were waiting for a Jamaican team to come, and I was in YWAM, a missionary organization, and so a team from the Jamaican base had to come down, and they couldn't make it. So our base leader joked that it was snowing in Jamaica. Can you believe that the Americans bought that? They thought that was actually true. It snowed in Jamaica and they couldn't come.
I do believe I've heard a rumor once that it snowed up in the Blue Mountains.
Oh,
I
I
don't
can
know
see
if I
that.
fully believe that, but definitely wouldn't be slowing that would impact people's flight patterns. No, it's not snowing in Kingston. That's not gonna happen ever. Not gonna
Yeah,
happen at all.
yeah.
Well, until the world ends, maybe, but maybe the
Mm,
day after tomorrow, but not today.
unintended.
Pun intended.
All right. So today we wanted to talk about religion and specifically our own version of upbringing in a religious household and a religion vibe, right? Because I think our experience is a lot different than what a lot of people experience. First of all, we grew up Christian, right? Um, so how would you label what you grew up in?
I would live what I grew up in using language that I've heard from a psychologist I follow online. I grew up in a high control religious system.
Hmm.
So it was a system where religion was used as a means of controlling very many aspects of your life and your existence and expression. It happened to be under Christianity, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure there are other religions or other organizations that can be classified as high control. And so that translates to the things I was even allowed to think about, how I was allowed to speak,
Yes.
dress, who I was allowed to interact with, how I was supposed to behave, what kind of jobs were appropriate. Many different things were very much controlled from the perspective of you have to go through the authorities above you to
Mm-hmm.
determine what's correct. And it was
Yeah.
Christian. I would say we fell somewhere under evangelical, which means we want to evangelize to other people to some degree. But my church was very unique in the sense that I don't really know what denomination they fell under. And I think as a
Mm.
church organization, they did a lot to develop the human, meaning they were very much about
Yeah.
human development, intellectual development, emotional development, wellness, and all of that sort of stuff. But it also was sort of cultish or cliquish in a sense where we had a concept that we were the chosen ones who were better than everybody else in the world. And therefore meant that other people didn't deserve as good treatment as we do. And so if someone were to leave the
Mm.
religion, excommunication is a very normal thing, which I think is that's a characteristic of high control. That's how you control people too.
Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
fear that by not being in a part of the group, well, you're completely out on your own.
You're outcasted, shunned,
Yeah. So I
right?
would say a high control Christian household. That's
Hmm.
that's that's my upbringing in Jamaica,
Yeah. And
post colonial, with some level of slavery imprint in the way that things happen. Yeah.
yeah. And mine is so similar, right? It's so similar. I love how you said that there wasn't a defined denomination, right? Like I remember at school they would ask, what denomination you are when you're filling in things, and I changed schools a few times. Um and I would always ask my mom. Oh, and there was also like this I don't know if you guys, I think it's a very Dutch thing. They would have these friendship books, and it had pages where you would fill, each friend will fill in like their name, their hobbies, their dog's name, and like stuff like that. And there, they sometimes ask, what religion you are too. And so, my mom used to say, we are Pentecostal. But later on, I found out that Pentecostal is a specific religion that is organized, right? That is usually under the something of Christ, something
Yeah,
like
lots of
there's a,
Jamaicans are Pentecostals.
yeah, it's under that religion. Um, but what I found fascinating too, you said that you were the chosen ones and that particular church was it, right? And for us, there was a lot of talk about other denominations as they don't know what they're talking about. Like the
Same.
Adventists, they don't know what they're talking about. And
Yes.
specifically, a lot of attack on the Catholics because a majority of Curacao is Catholic. So it was like, yeah, in the Catholic Church, they don't do this. And so they don't have a relationship with God and they don't know what they're doing. But on another level, it happened quite often where the prayer and the prophecy that was given was that people that has left will return.
Mm-hmm.
And
I've experienced similar.
yeah, and specific, and it wasn't like it was our church and other churches and we were working together. It was our church and our church only. So if you left our church, that meant, oh, you need to, like, God will call you back. So that's what I grew up hearing when I was in it. And I was very young at that time. Now, after I left, I heard some of the reasons why people left. We want to know a reason. So there was always some issue around money, right? Like obviously they take ties and all that stuff. But on top of that, our church specifically, the pastor wasn't good with money. There was no accountability or anything like that. So at some point, when I was really young, so I didn't understand these things back then, he asked the congregation to go take out a personal loan, give it to him, to the church, not him, obviously, give it to the church, and the church will then pay whatever the monthly payments were, which in itself is a little bit fraudulent. I don't know if it's like something you can go to court for, but it is definitely not, it's definitely shady. Well, the church didn't actually make those payments. So then people had a personal loan paying for these personal loans and they didn't receive the money because the money went to the church. And so some people got mad and they left the church for that.
Oh wow.
And these are some of the people that were then prophesying that they're going to come back.
Oh my gosh. That's a
So
messy
I'm like,
situation.
that's so fucked up.
That is a messy situation.
They never talk about the reasons why people left. It's always like, oh, they
It's
left.
almost like it's on, yeah, it's on the other person. Something's wrong with the other person to have
Yeah.
left. And that is some of the languaging that I definitely would have experienced. Well, my own self having left my church and my family's
Hmm.
religion. Um, yeah, the emphasis is never on why would Cherise have left?
Yeah.
You know, it's always that it's always an assumption that Cherise was not strong enough, righteous enough, whatever enough to continue to be a part of
Hmm.
the dynamic. Hmm. And that's challenging because, well, it's gaslighting, quite
It
frankly,
is.
on an organizational level.
It is.
Even as you're saying it, there have been a lot of times. So I didn't leave my church because of such a dramatic situation like that. That's really problematic. I
Yeah.
mean, really, because that's affecting people's everyday life. But I have said to myself, I left the church because I was searching and it no longer represented a space that I felt safe to search in. So in my specific church, there was a scandal, which happens,
Mm-hmm.
with one of the pastors who was found out to have a wife outside of, well, a woman outside of his wife and ended up having a baby. And it was brought to the attention of the congregation. And I'll tell you this, I actually wasn't even upset about I guess maybe even back then, I had a more open view on relationships. I've talked online about being polyamorous. That's not what this episode is about. But
Mm-hmm.
when I heard about him and the other woman and the baby, that part never really shocked me.
Mm-hmm.
But what shocked it, now that I think of it, that's interesting. I wasn't really shocked or upset about that so much as I saw someone who was teaching me a certain value system that he couldn't uphold.
Hmm.
And then I saw that the value system had failed this human. That's how I saw it. So I
Yeah.
saw this value system has failed this human because this human, my pastor, and he was one of the favorite pastors for me. He was the most engaging, energetic. He was one of the youngest pastors too. He's messed up, quote unquote. But if he can mess up, that means something here is not serving him,
Yeah.
And for me, it became clear that something about the church was not serving. Couldn't if I couldn't trust that he could stay on the straight and narrow, poor little
How could
me
you?
who was sneaking and fucking on Friday nights, how could I even think, right, that I had a chance? And then, and outside of that, there's a second part which I did not like at all. They made a real example and mockery of him that I thought was
Mm.
just evil. I didn't like the way they treated him. They spoke badly about him. They shamed him. Um, they shamed his family. And for me, I did not see love in the way he was treated. And I just that was the most offensive part to me. I didn't see
Mm-hmm.
love in the way he was treated. Um, and he was brought up to apologize to the church. And I remember him apologizing, sorry that I haven't kept the values, sorry that I haven't done this, da, da, da. And I was listening and I was like, I don't really care about you apologizing to me. It doesn't affect me. What about your family? Like, do you have a
Mm-hmm.
consciousness of how you've affected your family in this? To me, the fact that in his apology, he didn't even mention his family also
Mm.
felt off. It was just like, fuck the
Yeah.
church at this point. This is your individual life. You have a family. Your sons are going to be affected by this, your wife, whatever. Where's that? It's almost like this there I could see very clearly this over allegiance to the church and the church values that just almost erased the real human experience on so many
Hmm.
levels.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't it yeah, that was my choice to say, okay, yeah, this well, I don't have no hope here. If my pastor can't do it, me can't do it. So we just let me just stop trying.
I I love your
What?
honesty with that.
Because might as well just go there and try and figure it out on my own because whatever is going on here not working.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because for me, the reason I left had nothing to do with anything that other people did. And I find this fascinating because I had a conversation with somebody that listened to the podcast and that was saying that, "Oh, I'm sorry you were hurt and that's why you left." And you don't agree with people's sins and people's mistakes. That's why you left. I'm like, no, 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 no. I fully accepted the narrative of this is where the sinners gather. We're here because we're not perfect. Like I fully accepted that narrative. And I still think that is very amazing, because once you say, hey, we're not perfect, that in itself is beautiful, because we're not perfect. We're in the process of becoming, and becoming as best as we can as human beings, whether that is inside or outside the church, period. But I think what, for me, the reason why I didn't feel aligned anymore was whatever I was experiencing, like the high, the connection to God, all that stuff that I experienced in the church, I realized I can also experience it outside the church. And that's when I was like, oh,
What's the point?
yeah, what's the point? Right? And
Yeah.
it brings me back to the example that you used on our first episode, where you talked about the vantage points, right? Like, it's, I only saw the connection to God from the vantage point of Christianity, and specifically the church that I grew up in. And
Mm-hmm.
when I went into missions, I realized that there's more denominational vantage points to this Christianity thing,
Mm-hmm.
because I met incredible humans in a non denominational organization, and all of them had their own connection and their own way
Mm-hmm.
of getting to God, including Catholics. And so then I was like, okay, so I widened my vantage point a little bit. And then when I realized that there's so many ways to get to this place,
Yeah.
then I was like, okay, so I don't really need the Christianity. And I definitely don't like a lot of the rules. I don't resonate with a lot of the things. So I might as well just skip it. It's not necessary for me.
Yes. I actually relate to not leaving the church because of something someone did. And when you said that, the story I gave was why I left the more cultish church that I was a part of. And
Mm-hmm.
I think some important context too is that that church was very rigid about how we went about stuff. Like, honestly, Sunday felt like I was in university. It really felt like a university course, that church. It did. Because
Mm-hmm.
we were studying workbooks and we were aligning ourselves with the principles and we were fighting in the name of God. And you had prayer meeting Tuesday and you had women's meeting Saturday and you had church meeting Sunday. And church felt like another subject in university. And so, when I say why me a bother, it was all of this effort that I was doing to be perfect and
Mm-hmm.
seeing, because we have now the monopoly on what it means to perfect yourself as a Christian, right?
Yeah.
And seeing that it had failed for that leader, me say, no, Sam, me stress out. I was already
Mm-hmm.
stressed. But I didn't leave in Christianity. I left that church and I started looking for other churches. And similar to your experience of seeing people with different vantage points in YWAM, I started exploring um, churches. Every church and denomination has different vantage points. So I
Yeah. Yeah.
started exploring that. And I remember finding one church in Mandeville, my hometown in Jamaica, who had a slogan, love people, love God.
Mm-hmm.
It's that simple. And that really resonated with me because my first church, I mean, I don't know what their slogan was, but their slogan was the effect like, be a soldier for the war and ever militant, right? That's what that would be what it, be a religious soldier and ever militant. And I felt stressed. Oh my God, I was in architecture school. School was stressful. I didn't want to go to church and feel stressed out. So a church that had a slogan of love people, love God, that simple, felt like a relief. And I
Yeah.
started going to that church and it was a relief. No, I was back and forth between Mandeville and Kingston. So I eventually left that church just because I'd relocated. But I found sister churches to it that also had a more open sense of, they weren't as judgmental. They weren't as we have the monopoly on how to be a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
They were, like you said, more we're sinners trying to find God, blah, blah, blah. But what eventually did lead me to leaving the church, I think it was accumulation of things. I've always been I think very studious with my spiritual study. It's
Yeah.
something that my parents have instilled in me. From the day I born, 6 o'clock every morning, we're doing devotions, rain or shine. So study was a thing for me, and even just it became a part of my personal thing. So I knew in my
Mm.
20s I wasn't just going to church to go to church. I was diligently seeking God and diligently seeking an understanding of what God meant to me. And as I was seeking God and as I was connecting with this idea of in Christ we are made new,
Mm-hmm.
there was something about and feeling that and starting to feel the comfort in, okay, I feel guilty because I masturbated yesterday, but God has made me new, so I'm good. I'm like, I'm healthy. I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
I can feel forgiven. Going to church and hearing the same thing every week about how horrible of a sinner I am and how unworthy I am of God's
Mm.
love, it just wasn't resonating with me because I kept saying, but if Jesus came to connect us to God, why every week I have to stress out about being a sinner? Why can't I just be with God? Why can't I
Yeah.
just be with God? And it felt like I could start to see this cloud of shame that was in the church. The Holy Spirit was not the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit was the holy shame, right? Like it's just this feeling of this holy shame that's just filling the room. They have songs that talk about Holy Spirit, fill this place. Shame fill the place. You know,
That is so true.
shame
That's
fill the
exactly
place.
how it happens. Yeah.
And so as I was coming closer to God and feeling safer with God, shame was having less and less of a space in my life. And so
Mm-hmm.
I did not resonate with the shame that was being put out in church every week. That was one. And then especially the shame around sex and sexuality, because, sometimes I don't, I talk about sex a lot, and it's not that I think sex is the most important thing in my life. I don't have that much sex. Sex is in my everyday world. Sex is not like, but it's something I talk about a lot because it's a very specific area of my life that I've had to deconstruct because it was a specific area that was
Mm-hmm.
attacked, I would say, by Christianity.
Yeah.
Christianity puts so much emphasis on how you must not have sex and how you're going to hell, and just a lot of fear and terror around it. I was expressing to a friend yesterday, when I was in my 20s and I would have sex, I would spend a week in repentance, begging God to
Mm.
forgive me. And when I say it, I don't know if I can really encapsulate with words the amount of terror that was in my heart and
Yeah.
mind and body around this. That is not healthy. And I've seen someone say it constitutes sexual abuse because you have programmed someone to connect sex with evil, sadness, bad, negative emotions,
Yeah.
bad mental health,
Mm-hmm.
right? Around my sexuality that has been incurred by the church. But as I'm just, me and God chilling, because me and God started chilling and hanging out, and I'd left my cult church and I'd now gone to a more open church, and I started realizing, I just want Sundays to be in nature. I feel God in nature. And my parents thought I was a witch because I said I worship God. My church is nature,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, as I'm doing that and just feeling myself and me and God parring and we're having conversation, I said to God, I'm like, God, I don't understand how I'm supposed to feel guilty about sex if it's a very natural occurrence. It just don't make no
Uh-huh.
blood clot sense to me. It don't make no rotted sense. How am I going to feel guilty about this thing when you put it in me? Me, so
Yeah.
why me must take
Yeah.
responsibility for the fact say you put this in a me?
Yeah.
And that was a big turning point. So it was a shame generally of like, why do I always have to be asking Christ to reconnect me with God? I'm connected to God. That was one. And two, the why do I have to feel ashamed of my sexuality? It just not making sense to me. And those things kind of led me to be less and less interested in the church. It wasn't like I made an official, I'm leaving the church, but it was less and less interested. And then once I saw that I was not there, I also said, I might go back because I like the idea of community and whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
I will only ever go back if I can have such a strong understanding of myself that I am not affected by groupthink. That was my that was my
Yeah.
thing to myself, because there's
I
also
love that.
groupthink that exists there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
People are
It's a
not
culture.
necessarily, yeah, not necessarily think being critical for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it was important to know that I establish a way of critical thinking for myself. I'm sure I could go to a church now. I don't really have an interest per se, but I'm sure I could go to a church now and it'd be an edifying experience. because I'd be able to process whatever is being said through my understanding of spirituality and the divine
Hmm.
and take what resonates and leave what doesn't. I think I could do that now, but I'm not necessarily interested in that.
I don't know if I can do it. Like, I've gotten to the point where worship music like makes my skin crawl.
I like worship music actually. It soothes me. Certain
And I
songs. It depends.
and I've and I in fact, when I started to move, because I'm very similar to you in the sense that I moved slowly away from the church, right? Like 4 years ago or so, maybe three, four
Oh, it was
years
at
ago.
least 10 for me. It was at least 10 for me. So
Oh no, no, it's that long for me, but I mean, I was invited to something about YWAM here in Curacao, and I went and I was like, I'm pro YWAM and everything. But then I realized, oh no, another disappointment because some of the things that were said there. My God, this girl was talking, and these two male pastors were like contradicting her just for contradicting sake. Like they didn't have any proof. They were saying, oh no, the first YWAMers did this and that. And I can't. That girl is just like, oh, just let them. I couldn't. I was like, so do you have proof? Is this it? And I just had to fight with the pastors because I'm like, why is a
Shayna's like, I
girl?
had to. I was
Yeah,
obligated to fight
we
with the
have to stand
pastors.
up for this because I mean, how is a girl that's taking on is trying to do something really good? She's telling you that she's done her research. You know she's a smart girl. Or maybe you don't because maybe you think she's dumb because she's a woman. Anyways, and you stand there and you're like, oh no, that's not correct information. And I knew it was correct information. That guy is not even hasn't even done YWAM. You know what I mean? Like, why are you butting in? Like, if you don't know the correct information, why do you have to like put your thumb of oppression over somebody?
Well, that's why. Because you don't know and you can't be showing up for not knowing.
Yeah, yeah. And I see a lot of that shit. But with like worship music, I remember when I first started my coaching business, I started listening to some worship music because it was always something very soothing to me. And I started using it instead of saying God, like I changed the word God to me because
Yes.
I feel like I'm one with God. And so if I'm saying I worship you, God, and worship you, Sheedia, it's the same thing, right?
Mm.
But I can't even do that anymore. It's ruined. Like sometimes I hear oh, I beg you to save me. I
Yeah, the
can't
beg used
live
to save me
without
part.
you.
Yeah, I can't do that one so much. I can't do that one. That one, that makes my skin crawl for sure.
You make me worthy. I'm worthless without you. And I think it's interesting because there's one way like you can say those things. I mean, no, wait. These things sound differently depending on your background, right? If you come from a background that you're not worthy, I think especially women, because one, there's misogyny. Then you add in the transatlantic slavery fact where you literally have slavery in your blood. Um, and then probably your parents too didn't tell you that you were worthy. If you're singing a song, oh, I'm worthy, I'm worthless without you, make me worthy, like these type of songs, it's not going to help you with anything. You're not going to go anywhere in life. You can't.
I mean, you're saying that honestly, Shada, and it makes me emotional to the point it's sadness and anger and tears. Um, and I feel it. I have a theory that I don't know exactly, but at least in the post-colonial context, I do feel there's a part of religion that helped to subdue people, right? So
Of course.
if people feel worthless, they're not standing in their power to effect change. They're coming every Sunday to
Mm-hmm.
beg God help me, but they're not even fully exerting all of their willpower, maybe a little bit, but not all of the willpower they have access to, right? No, it's
And
sad. It's very sad. It's sad. It's sad that that is being programmed into people. That hurts me. That I feel
yes.
pain because of that.
Yes. And I'm seeing the effects of that firsthand because the older family members in my life, they're older now. And one specific comes to mind that she's having trouble with walking and her mind and all that stuff. But she doesn't put any effort. She doesn't want to do anything to make it better. She's just like, God will heal me. And it's like, you can go to therapy, you can, there's medicine. Even if you don't want to take the medicine, like there's so many other things, there's so many ways that this can be a possibility. But it's like, no, God will heal me. And that's where, and it's a full give up. It's not like God will heal me or God has brought you in my life with this idea. None of it. And it gives that story. I don't, you probably heard it, where this man was sinking, was drowning, and he was like, God will save me. And a helicopter came and he's like, no thank you, God will save me. Another boat came, he was like, no thank you, God will save me. And I don't know, something else came and he's like, no thank you, God will save me. And then he drowned, and and he was like, God, why didn't you save me? God was like, God, I sent the helicopter, I sent the boat, I sent everything to save you, but you didn't want it. But if you come from all those layers and intersectionalities of feeling worthless, and then you're singing and you're affirming, because worship is very much affirmations, right? It gets into your subconscious that you're literally worthless, but God is going to save you. And if
So you
God
just
doesn't
wait. You
save
just sit down
you,
and I wait. You just sit down
yeah,
and I wait.
yeah. And on top of that, if God didn't save you, it's probably because you did some sin or something along the way that
And
made
then
God
and
not
then
choose you.
exactly. And so God not choosing you is also your fault. So God's supposed to save
Yes.
you, but God don't reach. So feel even worse, Sarah, because it's your fault why God isn't here, because you've done
Yes.
something.
And I'm in a group on Facebook that's all about deconstructing, and and there's this one person that's like, God is a narcissist. I'm like, at first I was like, no, don't say that about God though. But then I was like, it starts to make sense. As you
Well,
said, it's
I would say the
gaslighting.
concept of God that we're taught.
Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah,
concept of
yeah,
God
yeah.
that we're taught. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my issue with it too. I'm like, well, it's, if we're deconstructing from that, but the way that God is taught and portrayed and all that stuff, especially from the background that we're from, he's a narcissist.
Well, that would track. I mean, Christianity has this idea that God is the head, then there is a pastor who is the
Uh-huh.
head of the church. So God or Christ is the head of the whole church, pastor the head of a specific church. Within the church, you have the elder who is the head of another section. But underneath that, you have the father of a house who is the head
Uh-huh.
of the household. And so, if we look at the way God was taught in church, the concept of the Christian God that we were taught, being a narcissistic, for me, that would track because I believe the way I experienced my father was narcissistic. I believe the
Uh-huh.
way I experienced my pastor was narcissistic, meaning, I don't want to just throw in the term, but meaning that they needed my energy, attention, agreement, falling in line for them to feel good about themselves or solid. That's how I would define narcissistic.
Mm.
Like they need to manipulate me, or they need me to give them whatever attention, energy source for them to feel solid in their space. So it's not so much as, my father hold this space and I naturally look and see, oh yes, dad, you really are holding this space. Good, great job. Thank you. It's more like he needs me to affirm him as the head of the household, to be the head of the household, as opposed to his actions, as opposed to his energies.
Uh-huh.
No, I'm not saying my father didn't show up in good, positive ways, but there have been, and I think there are many ways that he was a good man. I want to put that out there.
Uh-huh.
But there also have been ways in which I've seen my father demand me to respect him when, quite frankly, his actions were not worthy of
Yeah.
my respect, quite frankly, the way he spoke to me, the way he treated me in a situation. But I was just expected to subdue myself and say, yes, my worthy
Yes,
father.
master.
Yes, my worthy father. And that, he gets that from the pastor, who gets that from the God that we're taught about,
Hmm.
you know? And it's not the deconstructing we have. No, here's where I'm going to go devil's advocate. The deconstructing that we have the privilege of doing, you and I,
Hmm.
quite interestingly, I also think, or specific families have supported that in a specific way, maybe in a unspoken or unknown way, in the sense
Hmm.
that because of whatever level of stability that they did give us, we had the space to start asking questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my parents, yes, Christian, whatever, but upper middle class, comfortable, gave me enough space to start asking questions that maybe they didn't have the space to ask. They just, kind of more or less went with. And as I start
Hmm.
asking questions, I'm going to start deconstructing because the natural flow of events for me, I don't feel uncertain about the fact that I've left the church. It's funny when I talk to people who who I know from the church, and it's like, here they're talking to me and I know they think that they are going to convince me to come back to church. I
Yes.
know they think
Yes.
so. I just leave them. I'm just like, hey, look, I can have a conversation with you as a human. It's fine. I know you think you're evangelizing to me. I am so confident with where I am because it was a natural progression. I didn't leave a church out of like, ugh, puff and puff. It was a very natural seeking and searching, and my search just took me outside of the church. It did.
Hmm.
It really
Hmm.
did. It did.
It's
And I'm satisfied
yeah,
with
it's
where
your
I'm at.
own research. I love what you said about people think they can convince you to come back to the church. Because one, I think it's funny because it's not going to happen for me either. I never say never, but at the same time,
Say
it's like,
never, yeah.
eh, this is pretty close to never.
At least not in the way they're imagining.
Yeah. And on the other hand, there is this me putting myself in their shoes, right? Because they use the word backsliding when you do not when you move away from the church, right? And for me, the way that I envisioned that when I was a Christian is more so of a slip, like I fell off. Oops, sorry, So I can imagine that that's what they're experiencing. And also, I feel like the church portrays this backsliding situation of not being part of it as a um as an easy thing that can happen. You fell into sin and things didn't really go well. But it's been fucking hard. Like if you grew up, and I think this is different too when you chose Christianity versus when you grew up in it.
Hmm.
Because I literally do not know a time that I wasn't a Christian before I moved away from it.
Same,
My
same,
family,
same.
it was all about trying to get all of them in it, and a majority of them were. The ones that were not Christians, we did not really communicate with. So it's not like I have family members that I can say, oh, now I left the church and let me go hang out with these family. There isn't any,
Yeah,
right?
I know all of my family
And
members were very Christian, cousins.
yes. And it's like my friends, YWAM, if you look at, people go to college and they have their college friends. Mine were YWAMers. They were all Christians. They do not understand me and they don't get it. Like their whole life is built around Christianity. The activities they
Hmm.
have, the friends they have, just like mine was. So then I'm literally an outcast.
Yeah,
That is not easy. I'm lucky enough that my family didn't shun me or didn't stop talking to me, but it's caused a lot of strife. And there's definitely no more of a connection with the family members that are heavy into church because they just can't love me and appreciate me the same way. Like, they're like, oh, I prayed for you. I'm like, don't pray for me, please. Or, I prayed that you're going to come back to the church. I'm like, don't do that. That's disrespectful to my wishes.
You know, I actually told God the other day, please cancel all the prayers that my parents are making for me right now. Like, because I know their prayers are going in the wrong direction.
They're probably praying you have horrible sex.
Well, they probably would be successful in that regard,
Nah, come on.
unfortunately.
Come on.
Well, you know, I've had to, no, I do have my, I'm not having horrible sex, but I've had to be very intentional about having healing sex because
Yes.
my sexual experience has been fragmented because of um the shame that I've embodied around
Uh-huh.
sex. Yes, I know. Okay, I got tattoos, I have piercings, I look like this funky girl, and I look very free. I dress freely, and I am in my mind, sure, but my body is still catching up with that freedom. So
Mm.
there is, and so I didn't say to cancel the prayers. I said, God, please cancel whatever curses my parents may be putting on me, because
Yeah.
in their mind they may be praying for me. I don't mind people praying for me, depending on the person and their heart. And if I can see that they seem like a genuine person, if they tell me that, I'll say thank you. And then I also will, in the same moment, pray to God, my understanding of God, because I use the term God now. For many years, I couldn't, but I
Mm-hmm.
feel comfortable using God now because I've separated it from the Christian term.
Yeah.
Um, I will say to God in that same moment, only that which is beneficial will reach me. So people can pray for me if they want, if that's their intention, if it means a good thing, but only that which is beneficial for me will reach me. Um, but yeah, no, I'm sure there's some prayers that my family has out there that constitute curses in my opinion. And I
Yeah.
ask to cancel those, like cancel the curses. Yeah.
Yeah. Going back to like the sex talk, right? For me, it's been interesting. I don't feel like um I feel like I got over the shame that religion brought on in regards to sex really quickly, which was pretty which was amazing. Like there was still like the whole misogyny part of it where it's like, oh, you're there to please the man and those type of things, which is closely related to religion too, but I feel like the actual shame of, oh no, you shouldn't have sex because it's sinful,
Mm-hmm.
type of thing, that felt different for me. But the shame and the issues around relationships, that was a big one for me. Like you should get
Explain.
married.
Mm-hmm.
You should only, like, God knows who the partner is for you. And you need to marry that partner and stay with that partner your entire life. Divorce is not, I mean, depending on who you ask, I've heard different
Mm-hmm.
ideology around divorce, but it was mostly frowned upon, right? And so I was dating somebody when I was in YWAM who's a Christian that I prayed and I prayed and I prayed and I prayed and I was like, God, give me a sign if this is a man for me, and blah 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 blah. And my family didn't approve, but YWAMers kind of approved as long as we kept all these rules. It was a whole thing. But when that relationship didn't work out, that was so shameful and heavy on me,
Mm.
because it's like, oh, the person that God told me that is there for me is no longer, didn't work out. So I felt like this level of heaviness that I wasn't going to find a man, that I was going to be lonely my entire life, that I made a mistake, that I should have tried harder, that all this stuff, which none of that is actually true. But it was so heavy on me. And then when I got into my current relationship, it was very much like, oh, we got to get married and we got to do this. And there wasn't the space for it to flow naturally. And now I'm in that space where it flows naturally. And it's been maybe a year, 2 years where it's been really, really flowing. And I'm not constantly
But
like,
how
this
long
is
has
what
that
we should,
relationship been overall?
about to be 12 years.
Okay, so that's a
That's like
significant.
10 years trying to get over that, you know? So yeah, it's interesting because that's been my journey and my progress. And I was having a conversation with my partner yesterday, and he's like, I can finally tell you everything. He's like, it's been a long time that I couldn't tell you certain things because you would judge me and you would tell me. And I said, yes, I was focusing more on the goal of where you should be or what
Mm-hmm.
we want to achieve than to acknowledge your feelings. He's like, yeah, you're just trying to be a coach and everything. And I think that's interesting that he used that word because I am a coach. But before that, I wasn't a coach and I was still doing it. It was literally because of the upbringing.
Well, the upbringing of we have to tell the world what is right. I think there that gets
Yes.
that
Yes.
that that like flows over into everything we do. We have to tell the world what is right. The world doesn't know what's right. They're living in sin. We know we have the right knowledge from God. And whether or not you leave the church, you still can carry those principles. So those are the
Mm-hmm.
principles, for example, of fundamentalism.
Yes.
You're used to a fundamentalist view, which is means you have a very rigid view of how things should be. That's what fundamentalism really comes down to.
Mm-hmm.
And whether or not you apply it to Christianity, you can apply it to something else. And I've had those challenges too. So I left Christianity and then I applied to even myself. Okay, if I wake up in the morning and I don't write in my journal, I am going to be struck from heaven. You know, like lightning is going to strike me from heaven because I did not write in my journal
Yep.
one day. You know,
I've had the same
it gets
experience.
applied. It's applied to the same thing. I think I've talked to you about this. I told you like I realized I'm grateful for self-awareness, but I realized how I woke out of bed one morning and I got up and I said, okay, what do I want to do right now? It's like I want to take some time to sit at my altar because I have an altar where for me I have crystals, I have um candles, I have water, I have elements. I represent fire, earth, air, and space, and water. For me, it's
Mm-hmm.
bringing all the elements together because for me, that's God as well. And I
Yeah.
sit there and I commune with my understanding of divine wisdom. So I woke up and I thought, I want to sit at my altar, but I want to make some tea first. I want to bring some tea to sit with my guides and my ancestors and have a little chat with them. My parents hear this, them just like go say, witch, burn her, burn her now. Sorry, you're gonna have to edit out that shouting.
No, it's good.
But yeah, they're just going to say which burner. And I guess, I'm going over it very quickly because I think I don't think you have a issue with that, but some people might be like, what issue are you talking about? But anyways, I want to sit at my altar, my dedicated space for prayer, um, and manifestation. So I
Your
went to go
upper
make the
room.
tea, my
Your
upper
upper
room,
room.
my upper room. Thank you. So I went to go make the tea. And while I was making the tea, I was thinking, should I have lit my candle first? Should I have written in my journal first? If I'm
Yeah.
making this tea, like, am I doing it in the right sequence of events? Da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, Jesus Christ, Chereese, calm the fuck down. I had to stop myself and I had to have a
Mm-hmm.
real conversation with myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you cannot be here every second thinking, afraid that whatever you're doing is not the right thing you should be doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's, I think, something else. One of the curses that Christianity has. This is what we should title the podcast: the curses of Christianity. One of the curses that Christianity had put on me is this Christianity plus having super, super strict parents. Because I also think, compared
Yeah,
to other
both.
Christian parents, my parents were
Mm-hmm.
a little
Mm-hmm.
extra. Them really did enough with the thing. It makes me always anxious that I'm not doing the right thing. So that means it makes it very challenging to just exist in a fucking present moment. Which, if
Mm-hmm.
you know anything about spirituality, even the Bible says, in your presence is fullness of joy. In the present moment is where you feel joy. But if you know anything about even Eastern spirituality, presence is where we feel peace,
Mm-hmm.
to be present. But if I'm always thinking, man, I can't be present because you know what's going to happen? All right, I'm present and I'm going to go to church. And my pastor going to tell me how the fact that me didn't look on that boy and him cute, hell. So
Mm-hmm.
that means that just a very natural thing that I was doing in the present moment has now qualified me for death and damnation.
Yeah.
And so then just going through life, subconsciously, I'm always wondering if what I'm doing is what I should be doing, or if somebody will come tell me, say, Mommy, I do another right thing. And it's not just Christianity, it's also in the cult of self-development as well. You know,
Yes.
I've heard you talk about this. I do use a lot of self-development principles and they work for me. I do. And at the same time, you have to make sure that you don't create a machine, a Frankenstein that's gonna kill you.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you could
Eh,
always be saying, all right, if I don't wake up at 5 o'clock, if I did it, if one day I wake up at 5 o'clock, when I don't wake up at 5 o'clock, I want to hear how guilty I feel. And I'm like, Sharice, please relax. Relax. Jesus Christ, who I believe in. Or in fact.
the yeah, it's a lot of shame on this is how it should be. And
Yeah.
if you do it wrong, then actually, like, I had a big fight with my dad the day that I got raped because he was arguing with me about how I should pray. And he's like, did you pray, like, after the fact, right? So it happened, I went to the police came, I had to go to the doctor,
Wow.
I had to go get medicine for HIV blockers, morning after pills, like, I did all that stuff. It's part of the rape kit that I went through. um but that night I was exhausted. So many people, so many conversations, repeating the story over and over again. And it happened to my body. Like, it's not like it happened some other day. It was that same day. And my dad was like, did you pray? I was like, yeah, I've learned to just pray in the moment. And I was praying when it was happening. And he's like, oh no, but that's not enough. You need to sit down and have a real prayer. I was like, I've learned to have conversations with God on the go. Like, I don't need that. And I just cursed him out. I was like, fuck you. And he, like, had a whole, like, breakdown and all that stuff. But I'm like, come on. Do you understand what
Wow.
has just happened to my body and everything that I had to go through? And now you're telling me that whatever I did with my beliefs and what I had available, the strength that I had, I still prayed. I prayed when it was happening. And you're telling me it's not good enough.
Ooh, that's a big one, Sheila.
Yeah.
Because then in that moment of even being extremely vulnerable, there's still an insinuation that somehow you have not been good enough to be worthy of God's support.
Yeah. Yeah.
Working through that is takes real discipline to be able to heal from that. I'm talking about the rape, to
Mm-hmm.
heal from that, which I know you've spoken about openly,
Mm-hmm.
but also to heal from a sense of unworthiness.
Yes. Yes. And it's interesting because there's the conscious part of it, and then there's the
Yeah.
subconscious
Yep, yep,
programming of it, right? If you tell
yep.
me, oh, Shadia, you're worthy, I'd be like, yeah, I'm worthy. I'm this, I'm that. But still, there's so many layers. And this is something that I love about Andy. He would always call me out when I was not acting like I'm worthy of something or I wasn't valuing myself. He's like, stop joking. You are worthy, or you're good, or you're this, you're that. And that made me like the way he was, because Andy's very joking and very fun and all that stuff, but he's very much, when it comes to me talking down about myself or not like standing in my worth, he's like, stop it. He becomes very strict, like very manly. Stop it. And that's been very helpful because it stops the natural progression of the I'm not good enough thoughts in the moment. And obviously it's also very healing because in this example, and in many, I can give so many other examples of how my dad didn't value me as I am, or didn't exude or communicate the fact that I'm worthy. In fact, he communicated the opposite of that. And so to have a friend that is a man that's cutting me off and saying, no,
Hmm.
you're actually worthy, he's He's literally doing the complete opposite of what my dad did.
Mm-hmm. Which is a blessing.
Yeah.
Which is a blessing that we get to have. I think life and God put situations in our life where, we have this talk of love yourself before you can love someone else. And I
Mhm.
really feel like it's more of a chicken and egg dynamic. Like it's a more of a concurrent dynamic, and it's one before the other. They work together in tandem, because if you've been taught that you're not worthy, meaning you don't know what worthiness feels like in your body. And my belief
Mhm.
is to embody something is how you make it real, because that's how you vibrate at it, and that's how you attract more of it to you. That's my
Mhm.
valid belief system, at least. If you don't know what that feels like, how are you supposed to vibrate at it? You don't know what it feels like. So when
Yeah.
you have friends who can give you a glimpse of what this thing feels like, what love feels like, what acceptance feels like, what safety feels like, something outside of you,
Mm.
you then at least have a reference point that you
Mm.
can now anchor in your body to
Yeah.
create for yourself. Not to say that you're dependent on them all the time, as long as you need to be, as long as they're supportive, it's fine. I mean, we
Mhm.
eat food to support our nutrition. Why do we act like to get support out of ourselves is somehow this bad thing in the personal development thing? Is love, self-love, 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 yes, as a part of the suite of love
Yeah.
that you allow yourself to experience, not
Yeah.
just in silence, right? Not just in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And so that's a gift that Andy would have given you in that specific context, because now
Yeah.
you have a reference point that you can start training to
Mhm.
more
Mhm.
and more.
Yeah. And I can see the difference in the results, right? Like how I show up, the things that I do, how I approach things, it's different. And that's a beautiful thing. Definitely.
That's a blessing.
Yeah.
That's a real blessing. And I think friends are such blessings in that way. Um, I have a friend who recently we were talking about a lot of stuff. He's heard a lot about my life experience in the past couple of years, which has been challenging, but I've also triumphed over quite a lot of things. And I remember him looking me in the eye and saying, Cherise, you are an amazing woman. And like when he said it, I really felt it.
Mhm.
I was like, thank you. And then I found that since he said that, there have been moments when I have remembered a challenging situation from my past, and where I would usually go to, man, that was so sad, that was so hard. I would shift now to, but how amazing that like
Yeah.
you were able to supersede that. And so his one word gave me a point of reference, and also permission to start saying the same thing to myself. Cherise, you're amazing. Actually, this morning, I sat down and cried about how well I think I have managed through really challenging circumstances over the past couple of years. And when I say how well, it's not just um, whether or not I had the skills to manage it before or not. It's more about I have remained open to love, and I have remained open to
Mm.
learning.
Yes.
And by remaining open to love and remaining open to learning, that has kept me moving forward at times when, boy, me really did just think, say, yo, better me dead, seriously. And so to be in a relatively calm moment in my life and just have a sit and be like, Cherise, you're here. You have good friends. You have support systems. You're eating good food. You live in a beautiful place. You're building your business. You're connecting with people. You're being
Mm.
creative. Have that moment and say, and you have it because you never stopped moving forward. You never stopped seeking help. You never stopped learning to love yourself. It brought tears to my eyes. And I sat
Yeah.
down. I was listening to this song called Concrete by Orion Sir. I don't know if you know it, but
Mm-mm.
the chorus talks about, I know you're somewhere so proud of me. And I think it's referencing like maybe a friend who has died, who's like looking down on this person life progress. But I just saw myself. I'm like, yeah, me, the
Uh,
future self of me right now in the present, looking back at the past self and saying, yeah, I'm really proud of you. I'm
yeah,
really, really proud.
you should be. You should be. Do you think that's a good place to end it?
I think so. I think maybe what I would like to wrap it up is if we're talking about being proud of where we've come, for you and for me, I am proud that we continue to question whatever was taught to us through Christianity, through our religious upbringing, and to
Uh-huh.
do so with an open heart and an open mind, and to do so at times with opposition, not being sure what's going to happen, not sure where this is going to go,
Uh, uh-huh.
and to allow ourselves to truly be molded by truth, at least the truth that we were uncovering. I think we can
Yeah.
be proud of that. And I think anybody who's listening who's on a similar journey of deconstructing any context that doesn't work for them, they can also be proud of just that intention to
Mm-hmm.
keep pushing forward, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to continue bringing more context to what you said too, because the more I think I share my story and you share your story, it gives all that more context. Because you said I've been through some really hard times. I know some of it. I don't know all of it, but the listeners are gonna get to hear more of it too. The dungeon community, and
Yeah.
so yeah, this is a wrap. Um, Let us know what you think. I love getting people's feedbacks from these episodes and the insights and the aha moments and whatever. So Spotify is like our main place where we publish these things. So if you can leave a comment there, that would be amazing. Um, but we're on YouTube, and more importantly, you can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Hey Shadia. I'll leave the information in the description wherever you're listening. Yeah. I feel so good. I'm so glad. Like, you know what feels fulfilling to me? Like you talked about being proud of where you've come. You're looking at it a little bit long term. I'm looking at it the short term of where I've come with this podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and including like the adversity that happened with Andy and the
Mm-hmm.
heavy uncertainty that still exists in many ways, in regards to that, and yet we are here having this beautiful conversation, or we had it, we're done having it now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you should be proud of yourself too.
Yeah, so thank you for sharing, being you, and being part of the dungeon community.
Dun dun
Dun
dun.
dun dun. All right, everyone. Peace out. Bye bye.